May have to turn these speakers on in here, Stephen. Everybody's 50 feet away from me now. I'm up this far because we are broadcasting now on Wednesday nights, and this is where the cameras are pointed, and so I'm going to stand where the cameras are pointed, and y'all can. Emma asked me where she was supposed to sit. I said, sit wherever. It'll be all right. It'll be all right. So anyway. We're in this early tonight. We'll get out early, I guess. The more I study the life of Paul in the book of Acts, the more impressed I am with what godliness in human form, and I don't mean God in human flesh. I don't mean that. But godliness in a human being. Apart from Jesus Christ. But godliness in a human being looks like, because Paul is a unique person. We've watched, we've talked about, we've heard even in our spiritual perception the difficulties he's dealt with, the things he's gone through, yet he remains faithful to God. And it is absolutely an incredible thing to witness as we've gone through this. And we come to chapter 23 where verse 12, I don't know if your Bible is broken down into different segments that are titled like a Schofield does. I know other Bibles do that. But if you've got a Bible that does that, then right above verse 12 is probably one of two things: the conspiracy to kill Paul or the plot to kill Paul. One of the two things is written there if it's divided that way. And it's really kind of an amazing thing the way these guys act. They act like what we would call heathen. And in a lot of ways they were. But they were religious people. They were zealots. Zealots for what they thought in their mind, in their heart, I guess maybe, they thought was godly, but it's ungodly. It's unlawful. Even according to their law, it's unlawful. Yet they pursue it. We'll pick up in verse 12, and when it was day. Let me go back to verse 11 because that really leads into it. We talked about it last week. We finished with it and the promise that God gives to Paul. The night following, the Lord stood by him and said, "Be of good cheer, Paul, for as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome." And God, in His infinite wisdom, knowing what Paul is about to go through, gives Paul an assurance. I don't know that maybe at the time that God said these words to Paul, and however that was, that He said that to him, whether it was in his mind or whether it was visible and audible, I don't know, but it was enough to where Paul knew it was God talking to him. I don't know if maybe whenever Paul heard that, he thought, well, okay, but why does that have any bearing right now? I don't know. He's appealed. He said, I'm a Roman. They're about ready to let him go. And then this happens. The following day, verse 12, when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together, bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. And they were more than 40 which had made this conspiracy, and they came to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have bound ourselves under a great curse that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul. Now therefore ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow, as though you would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him." And when Paul's sister's son heard of their lying in wait, he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions unto him and said, "Bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, "Paul the prisoner called me unto him and prayed me to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say unto thee." Then the chief captain took him by the hand, and went with him aside privately, and asked him, "What is that thou hast to tell me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldest bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly. But do not thou yield unto them, For there lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath, that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him, and now are they ready, looking for a promise from thee. So the chief captain then let the young man depart, and charged him, See, thou tell no man that thou hast showed these things to me. And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200, at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide them beasts that they may set Paul on, and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter after this manner. And then he writes the letter. We're not going to get really into the letter, but we do come down to verse 31. Then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul and brought him by night to Antiparis. On the morrow they left the horsemen to go with him and returned to the castle, who, when they came to Caesarea and delivered the epistle to the governor, presented Paul also before him. When the governor had read the letter, he asked of what province he was. When he had understood that he was of Cilicia, I will hear thee, said he, when thine accusers are also come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. So we see here God's protection on Paul. God's protection. We see, first of all, the madness of the ungodly. The madness of the ungodly. It's really a crazy situation. Paul has done nothing wrong. I mean, they've accused him of certain things. They have their accusations of what he's done. And they don't even have really, because in the next chapter, Paul calls for proof of it. And they don't have proof of their accusations. But they have accusations. There's no proof of them. They have tried to do things their way, and Paul even called them out. We looked at it last week whenever they were questioning him, and the chief priest said, bust him in the mouth. He said, how is it that you want me to obey the law when you're not even willing to obey the law? I haven't done anything wrong, but you can't even keep the law, and yet you want me to follow your law? And here they are. After that, God gives the promise, and the next day, it appears that it wasn't the elders of the council. It wasn't the older priests or Pharisees. It was some younger guys. Maybe kind of like whenever Paul held the coat for those that were stoning Stephen. And it was just enough to prove himself to them that he was a zealot, that he was willing to go the ultimate distance to prove himself. And here they come. They bond together. I want to say, first of all, the number of the group. The number of the group. Look in verse 13. And there were more than 40 which made this conspiracy. 40 plus of these guys came together and made this oath. They made a promise to each other. 40 of them. That's Paul must have been an intimidating guy. If they would have left it alone, if they would have dropped the charges, and this is kind of part of the madness of it, the insanity of sin. The things that sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Sin makes you do things that don't make sense. And say things and do things that don't make sense. If they had left it alone, and if they would have told the chief captain, listen, we're done. There's no sense in pursuing this any further. We're just let him go. We're going to leave him alone. He'd have let him go. Now, he might have let him go outside of city limits to try to get him to safety, but they'd have had a better chance at getting to Paul out there rather than trying to overcome a group. He's going to be escorted. Rather than trying to overcome centurions or their underlings, Roman soldiers, it'd have been easier to let them, but in their madness, they say, oh, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get it. We're going to get him to bring him here, and then we'll attack him. But 40 of them. 40 of them. That's crazy. Letter B, the oath of the group. The oath of the group. And this is truly madness. This is borderline insanity. Now, their plan is on the morrow, one day. Anybody can go one day without eating, I guess. But their plan is one day. We're not going to eat. We're not going to drink until we've killed him. That's insane. That's madness. It's madness. Now, apparently, in their minds, they thought this is a normal thing to do, but these are religious men. This isn't a gang of murderers. They were going to be. But it doesn't appear that was the normal thing for them. These are religious people. These are people who claimed to have a love for God. And here they are conspiring, planning to assassinate somebody, to the point that they are going to take an oath that we are not going to eat or drink until we've killed him, till we've put the knife in his throat or whatever. We're not going to do that. Second of all, part of the oath that's even more madness, that they were anathema. I think it's missing an N. No, anathema. Is that supposed to have an A and A-N? Ananth? That's right, okay. I didn't know if autocorrect had changed it. Anathema. It means accursed of God. So what they were saying is, you follow the logic of it, and it's utter nonsense. What they're saying is, we're not going to eat or drink until we have killed Paul. And if we can't kill Paul, then let God curse us. So if they do kill Paul, in their minds, they're justified. But God's not going to find them just in that. God's not going to see that as a well done, thou good and faithful servant. God, that's going to bring on themselves another curse of God. But instead of just saying, okay, we're not going to eat or drink until he's dead, they bring God into it. They bring a curse upon themselves and say, if we can't fulfill this, then God curse us. That's insane. It's insane to say we're going to commit. They held to the Ten Commandments. More so to the Sabbath than anything, but they held to the Ten Commandments publicly. I don't know about their private lives. That was it. That was the law, and everything that sprang from that. That was life. And probably the best known of the Ten Commandments is thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not murder. And here they hatch a plan with the idea that if we can't break our own law, if we fail in breaking our own law and murdering this man, then God curses. That's not even good thinking. That's not even good. It's not even logical to think that way. Of course, it's not ethical or spiritual or good, but even in logic, it's not even good thinking. It is insanity. Then you see also the support of the group. The support of the group. They come to the chief priests, the high priest, his underlings, and the Pharisees, the scribes, the council there. And they say, here's what we've got planned. We as a group, there they are, standing, 40 plus of them, standing in front of the leaders, the religious leaders, the ones that should have said, guys, you can't do this. This is a bad idea. From a standpoint of Roman control, of the Roman government, this is a bad idea. From a standpoint of the godly government, the government of God, the law of God, this is a bad idea. But they don't do that. They come and they say, this is what we've done. We're not going to eat or drink. Here's till Paul is dead, till we've killed Paul. In fact, we have sworn a curse on ourselves, a curse of God, anathema, if we can't fulfill this. You would think that the chief priests, the high priests, and the Pharisees and those that were seasoned would say, fellas, no. This, we'll get him a different way. If you're going to get him, we're going to get him a different way. This is going to bring the Roman government down on us. this is a bad thing. But no, what they say? Oh yeah, what do you need us to do? This is good. Yeah, we'll do this. We will send for the chief captain to bring him to us, and on the way, get him. They're going to attack not just Paul. They're going to attack Roman soldiers. That's not going to work out good for anybody. But they do. They get the support of it. They get the support of it. Unbelievably, they get the support of it. I want you to see number 4, or letter D, the trust of the group. Does anybody forgive me, all right, does anybody talk, gossip, run their mouth more than church people? I don't know, maybe people do, but human nature, people just do that. And here this group of men who have hatched this plan, they just assume that everybody's going to be quiet about it. We read that Paul's nephew he hears about it. It doesn't say that he was there when it happened. It said when he heard of their lying in wait. I don't know, maybe he was in the temple, or not in the temple, it could have been in the temple, I guess, but in that arena where they were talking about it. Is it possible? Maybe. I don't think it was. I think that they broke trust. And they went out of there talking about, oh, this is good. We're gonna get Paul. We're gonna get him down here. And he's whatever he's doing. Maybe he's selling bread. I don't know. And he hears these guys go by and they're talking about getting Paul. They're going to lie in wait, and they got a group of guys that are going to kill Paul. They had great trust, great faith in one another. No honor among thieves. Really ought to be no trust among murderers. But they just, somehow there's great trust. But they broke trust because Paul's nephew hears about it. And that brings us to number 2, the method of the master. Yes? Well,
looking at it from the other point of view, if somebody was coming up to our church and they was trying to tell us there was another
except
gospel that other than what the Old Testament was then, that there's a new gospel, you got to think how those people would handle it.
sure, we have that. We have Muslims in our community, but we're not conspiring as a group to go kill them. There's, when a Jehovah's Witness comes to my door, I don't pull a gun on them. Mormons come by, you see Mormons riding down the road on their bike, we don't run them over. Do we disagree with them? Yes. Do they believe that their way is truth? Yes. Did they believe their way was truth? Yes. But it wasn't just about truth with them. It was about power. And whenever Jesus came, and even John the Baptist, the forerunner, when he came, and people were being baptized, and they were following the message of John the Baptist that the Messiah is coming, and then Jesus came, and his message of love, and his message of truth, that the law was a slave master, and it is. The law is a slave master. And whenever he began preaching and people began following Jesus, they were turning from the power, the structure of the Judaism, of the rules of Judaism. And they began to lose power. That, I truly believe that was more what it was about in their hearts than anything else. Yes, did they believe that Jesus broke the Sabbath? Yeah. They believed he broke the Sabbath. But the callousness of it, because when you go back to when it all started with Jesus, it started basically at the pool of Bethesda, whenever he healed the man on the Sabbath. And this man is whole. He's walking. He's no longer begging. He's no longer occupying space where they would walk by and look at these people as though they were nothing. He's not there anymore. And the only thing they could think was, what happened to you on this? They didn't care anything about his well-being. They were worried about what Jesus did on the Sabbath. Who did this to you? do you mean who did this to him? They healed him. It was Jesus. And so it was yes, did they say that he broke the Sabbath? That's what they said. But if you watch their actions, go read, when we went through the book of John, we saw this over and over. It was about power. People were leaving their control. And the same thing's happening with Paul. All over, now it's not just in Jerusalem. It's happening all over Asia. People are no longer giving to the synagogue or going to synagogue the way they want. They're meeting in churches, a new religion. We can't have that. So although they will claim, their claims are that he broke the law, that he preaches another. It's about power. It's about power. There are very few things that drive people to do this, what they do. Two things would be money and power. Those things. And so although we do have that, we do disagree with other people. And they disagree with us. But it's not about control. That's not what we're about. We're not fighting for control. We're fighting for them, for their future. And so that's why we don't kill people, because they disagree with us. Because it's not about power. It was for them, though. It was for them. But we see the method of the master. First of all, the use of the young. He uses a young man. He uses Paul's nephew of all the things. Again, it'll be interesting. I like to think that Paul's nephew was saved. I hope he was. I hope that as Paul's nephew, if Paul was your uncle, he witnessed to him. He knows this story. I would hope that he was saved, that he's in heaven. And it'll be interesting when we get to heaven, and hopefully he's there for me to ask him, how did you find out about this? What happened? Were you in there? Did you hear it from a friend whose dad was there? It'll be interesting to hear that. We don't know how it happened. All we know is that God used a young man in a mighty way. And the courage, really, it doesn't appear that he was an older kid. To me, I think he's a little boy. I think he's a little boy. Just from the way I read it, I get that impression he was a little boy. It could have been a teenager, I guess. I think it was a little boy. And I think that God chose this little boy to be a messenger, to rescue Paul. Because God had promised. The Lord had promised Paul, you're going to Rome. And this little boy was able to help in fulfilling that mission. And he goes. That's a courageous thing to do. When you think about the community that he lives in the community that's plotting to kill Paul. And this, even if it is his uncle, it's still a courageous thing to do, to go and say, Paul, I got to tell you something. And he tells him the story. God uses methods we wouldn't use. God used other methods to deliver other people. Remember, Peter was in prison, shackled to two guards, two Roman guards. And what did God do? God sent an angel. Woke him up and said, Peter, get up. Come on, it's time to go, buddy. Get out of here. Chains fall off. Angel opens the door. Peter walks through, opens the next one. He goes through a series of doors, gets to the final gate. Everybody's asleep or shift change or something's happening. They open the gate and Peter walks out. Never even harassed in it. And God did all kinds of things. And God can do what he wants when he wants, but he chooses oftentimes to use us. And he uses a young man. But not only does he use a young man, we see also the use of the sinner. And I use that word because what we have in the religious, although we're all sinners, I understand that. From their perspective, the Romans were just heathen. And they were heathen. They were soldiers. And soldiers, even with Christ, even as Christians, oftentimes are rough. But, godless soldiers, man, we know what they are. Somewhat. And these guys, Romans who worship gods of immorality even. But he uses them. And what happens here is a very interesting thing. And it has to do with Paul's person, who he was. A centurion is not now he does answer. We know that he does have a higher ranking officer, but a centurion commands 100 men. He has 100 men under him, soldiers that follow him. Yet it's the centurion. Paul calls over the leader. It says he calls over the centurion. And he says, verse 17, he said, "Bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him." Paul's a prisoner. Yes, he has Roman citizenship, but he's a Jew. In his mind, what has preserved Paul to this point is the fact that he is Roman. He has Roman heritage. He's a Roman citizen, but he's a Jew. And I can't help but believe that these guys just equated all these religious Jews as the same thing. They're all nuts. They're all crazy. They're all mad. And he calls over this centurion. The centurion responds to him. And he comes to him. He obeys, if you will. That's not the right word, but he listens. And he says, "Take this man to the chief captain. Take this little boy to the chief captain." And amazingly, and this is all because of who Paul is, the way he was, the way that God worked through his life, the centurion does it. So he took him and brought to the chief captain and said, "Paul the prisoner called me unto him, prayed me to bring this young man to thee, who hath something to say to thee." He uses that center, the centurion, and he takes the young man. He follows Paul's instructions. Paul's a prisoner. He's a Jewish prisoner. Although he's a Roman, I get that. He still doesn't have power over the centurion. He's still just a citizen. But because of who Paul was and his reputation and the way he was, the centurion does what he asks. Brings him to the chief captain. You can read in verse 18. "Took him, brought him to the chief captain, said, Paul the prisoner called me unto him, prayed me to bring this young man to thee, who hath something to say unto thee." They don't know yet what it is. Now the nephew has relayed to Paul the story. And Paul said, "Hey, take him to the chief captain." But they don't know what the story is yet. But because of who Paul is, verse 19, "Then the chief captain took him by the hand." And that's one of the reasons I think it's a little boy, is because he takes him by the hand. What a father would do with a little boy. Takes him by the hand aside privately and asked him, "What do you have to tell me?" No other reason that he would do that except that God is using him. He's being used of God because of who Paul is, because of Paul's reputation, because of the way that Paul has carried himself. Here he is in jail, being accosted by the Jews. We looked at it last week. They thought he was going to be torn in half, that his limbs were going to be torn from his body from the crowd. They were arguing over and pulling on him. And here he listens to this prisoner's advice. Why? Because of the man that Paul was. He could have complained. He could have run his mouth. He could have argued. But he didn't do that. He let God fight for him. And that really brings us, that we're kind of talking about this already, but the mark of the godly, or marks of the godly. We see first of all patience. Patience in this. It may not be the best word. You can put faith out to the side, either one. I think they walk hand in hand many times. Faith and patience walk hand in hand. But you can put faith or patience there. God says the night before, says, "Paul, you're done here, but you're going to Rome." And Paul rests in that. He just simply rests in it. There are times in my life that God will reveal himself, reveal what he wants to do, and I get a little impatient. I get a little bit ahead of God. God, this isn't the way it's supposed to happen. This isn't what I'm supposed to do. And I think of two instances in particular that I thought that way. was when I left Georgia and when I came back to Georgia. Both times I thought, God, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. This is, it's supposed to go this way. It's supposed to go this way. And that's not how God was working. But Paul was a patient man. You hate to wear this out, but you look at what he's been through. All of the difficulty, all of the stuff we can't even imagine. Stoned to death, imprisoned, beaten, turned on by those in this group that were once his friends probably, turned against him. Yet, he remains true. He remains faithful, and he's patient in that. He doesn't, I go back to Isaiah 40, I can't even think right now, 40:31, I believe. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength, mount up with wings as eagles, walk and not be weary, run and not faint, walk and not be weary, run and not faint. They that wait upon the Lord, and when we talk about patience, that's what we're talking about. We think about patience as we get out here and go, okay, all right, just be patient. Just be patient. God will catch up eventually. God, you're taking a long time. But I'm going to wait until you catch up with me, God. I'll wait until you catch up with me. That's not patience. That's not the patience of Isaiah 40:31 or the patience that God wants us. The patience of Isaiah 40:31 is they that wait upon the Lord. And I've mentioned this before. I know that. I don't really have something to do this with in here. But if you could imagine a box here, and I were to get on that box, and I were to wait on that box, the foundation of that box, that's what the verse is saying. They that plant themselves on God and wait on Him. You work, and I'll go with you. Not get out here and go, okay, God, catch up with my plans. I got things to do. Come on. I'm trying to be patient, God. I'm trying to be patient. No. Faith, patience. They that wait get upon the foundation. And whenever you get on that foundation, and that foundation, wherever it goes, you go with it. That's patience. I'm learning that kind of patience because I've got a child learning how to drive. And I have to sit in that seat over there, and wherever she goes with that car, I'm going with her. And in a similar way, that's the patience we're to have with God. Now, we don't scream and holler whenever they're about to make a mistake. We don't do that with God. We wait. And as God moves, we move with Him. He had patience. Letter B, he had wisdom. We see the wisdom of the godly. I don't know that most people would have thought, well, I should tell the Romans about this. The little boy comes, his nephew comes, and he tells him what's going on. And Paul doesn't panic. He doesn't worry. He doesn't fret. He doesn't go, oh no, what am I going to do? I mean, he's already said it in our book a few chapters before. I'm willing to die for God. I'm willing to be imprisoned, and if it means I got to die for the Lord, so be it. I'll die. I'm willing to die. And so already he's okay with it. But it's one thing to say you're okay with it before anything happens. It's nothing to hear the news that they are planning it. They've got you in their crosshairs, buddy. It's about over. And he doesn't panic. He doesn't go, oh no, what are we going to do? He says, hey, come here. I need you to do me a favor. Take this little boy to the chief captain. He needs to tell him something. You make sure he gets a message to him. Why would he think that that's going to work other than Paul has simply lived out Jesus Christ and they have seen it in him and they respond to it. And he has the wisdom enough to say, let them take care of it. I can't do anything. I'm going to turn it over to the guys that can do something about it. And he tells those that are in charge, and God, I didn't really cover this in the use of a sinner, but God uses them. You look at, when you read the last part of the chapter, what they did 200 soldiers. 2 centurions said, get your soldiers, and I want you to take them to Felix the governor. I wonder, have you ever dealt with somebody and they're a hassle to deal with, or a group of people and they're a hassle to deal with, and you find a way to release them to somebody else, and you say, hey, I've got an idea. Why don't you go talk to them? It may have been that was the intent of the chief captain. He said, you know what? I could solve this for myself if I send him to Felix. I can just wash my hands of the whole thing if I can get this joker to Felix. And I'm going to do anything I can to get him to Felix. Whatever his reasoning was, he gets him to Felix the governor. But it's because of the wisdom of Paul. Paul says, I'm going to take this to somebody that can do something about it. He doesn't panic. He doesn't fret. He doesn't worry. He just accepts that God's going to take care of him, whatever that means. He says, I'll take it to them. But God gives protection to Paul. Why? Why? Because God had promised in what we have in verse 11 that Paul would go to Rome and minister there. And Paul just trusted it. He just took God at His word, as we should. As we should. And Lord, I pray that we will take you at your word. Lord, you give us so many promises, so many things in your word that you'll do for us and through us and with us. Lord, if we would just simply trust that that's what you're going to do. If we could take off the blinders of doubt, and if we could just rely on faith and follow through, Lord, we could accomplish amazing things. And I pray that we will do so. Lord, I pray you'll dismiss us with your blessing. I pray that we will, particularly, I think of my family and Bruce and June as we travel to Florida this weekend, Lord. I pray that you'll give safety. I pray that you'll bless in the service there, Lord. And no doubt unsafe people will be there. I pray that whoever is doing the service, Lord, would be already preparing to draw the net for salvation. And I pray that souls will be saved. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Have a good night.